everybody, and welcome to Sci-Frights, the podcast from the Interzone where horror meets sci-fi. I am your host, Liam Dunn, and with me is my co-host, Lindsay Hallam.
So today we are continuing our series exploring the legacies of Frankenstein. In the last episode, we looked at Nutty Professors. So this time we wanted to flip the perspective and investigate what it's like to be the monster. So Liam, what films are we covering?
We are looking at Brian DePalma's coming-of-age horror classic Carrie and Paul Verhoeven's sci-fi action satire RoboCop.
So just a reminder to our listeners, we are going to spoil the hell out of these films. So if you want to watch these films first, please go ahead and we'll be here when you get back.
And before we get into the films, Lindsay, tell us a bit about today's theme.
So last episode, we were looking at Nutty Professors, the history of the mad scientist in cinema that goes back, of course, to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and the character of Victor Frankenstein. In this episode, we wanted to kind of turn the tables and look and think more also about how the creature in Frankenstein also has influenced a lot of archetypes that you see in horror and science fiction, most obviously the monster and the creature, which are central to both the genres. And when you go back to Mary Shelley's novel, you begin with Victor Frankenstein and following his life, his childhood, his family, and then as he starts to do his experiments, and once he ends up creating the monster or the creature, he initially wanted the creature to be quite handsome and good looking, but through the process of being created, he becomes very ugly. And so as he sees his creation, he's so horrified that he just basically runs away. So the creature is born, essentially, and is immediately abandoned and is immediately seen as this hideous, horrible, monstrous creature. And so Victor Frankenstein leaves his creation and pretty much goes back to his normal everyday life. But later on in the novel, the creature ends up appearing to Victor, and then he starts to tell him what life has been like for him. And as the creature speaks, and he is very articulate, and he starts to tell about how Frankenstein's reaction to him, which is one of horror and disgust and abandonment, was pretty much what how everyone has reacted to him since he's gone out into the world. So all he really knows from humans is cruelty and rejection. And he goes on and he ends up living near this family, and he ends up talking to the old man who lives with the family who's blind, so he can't see him. But then that doesn't all go well. And so you start, as you listen to the creature's story, you have this immense sympathy. He just wants to be loved. He just wants companionship. He just wants understanding, and no one will give that to him because he looks like a monster. So you have, as a reader, immense sympathy. However, at a certain point, the creature starts to get angry. And he turns particularly on his creator, Victor Frankenstein. So then he vows to get revenge. And what he does is very monstrous. He kills Victor Frankenstein's younger brother, who's a child. So you have in the character of the creature this very sympathetic creature, but also one who's still capable of really horrible, monstrous acts. So you get the beginnings of this idea of you sympathizing with the monster. And also, I think what's really important is a lot of spectators, readers, when you, not just when you read Frankenstein, but when you watch any horror or science fiction film with any kind of monster or creature, you start to identify with them. And I think about Guillermo del Toro, who says, well, the first thing that I love is monsters. I identify with monsters. And a lot of fans of horror and science fiction really do identify with the monsters. And so with the monster, with the creature, with the alien, with the robot, you have essentially this other, this non-human thing. And what you have with all horror and science fiction stories is that monster or other is erupt in these others. Going back to Del Toro, there's this other really great quote that I love with him where he says, "Monsters are the patron saints of otherness. When I was a child, I was raised Catholic. Somewhere I didn't fit with the saints and holy men. I discovered the monsters. In Boris Karloff, I saw a beautiful, innocent creature in a state of grace, sacrificed by sins he did not commit. I saw a martyr in the Wolfman, who is the very moving essence of outsiderness with which I identified fully. Those monsters did not pretend to be something else. They presented themselves in their essence and in an immediate way. There's nothing more political than fantasy." I think, with this monster or with the creature, with the other, you have this embodiment, as Del Toro says, of outsiderness, but also he mentions there the political aspects of it, and how we'll certainly talk today a lot about, the political undertones that exist, I think, in both of the films, and how they are embodying the other in different ways. And so I really wanted for us to kind of talk about, how both of these genres really do present these others, these monsters, creatures, the non-human, ironically, as sometimes the most human characters of all in a film. And also, the fact that there's immense sympathy, but yet there is also this flip side of they also can be capable of really monstrous things at the same time. So that's what I wanted us to kind of start off with.
Yeah, well, I think any good monster is a reflection of us, isn't it? So I think we're all capable of monstrous things, and we're also capable of beautiful things, and it's putting those characters into a world, to work a well-worn cliche, a fish out of water in a world they never made, and just watch and sort of let them loose into that world, and to have us react to it in certain ways, I think, is what's so rich about these characters.
Yeah, and I think we've chosen two really good films to explore those ideas.
And with that in mind, that brings us to the first film that we're going to discuss in this episode, and that is Brian De Palma's adaptation of Stephen King's Carrie.
It's the night of the senior prom. The Bates High School gym is alive with excitement. Everybody is there, even Carrie White, the girl no one likes.
We're all sorry about this incident, Cassie.
It's Carrie!
And everyone makes fun of her.
Free, Carrie!
The girl who lives in that creepy house with her crazy mother.
Help the sinning woman see the sin of her days and ways. Show her that if she had remained sinless, the curse of blood would never have come on her.
The girl with the strange power.
If I concentrate hard enough, I can move things.
But tonight, no one will laugh at Carrie.
If you don't have a date for the prom next Friday, would you like to go with me?
She's with the best-looking boy in the senior class.
He's trying to trick me again.
She'll be voted queen of the prom.
You know, I can make sure that you don't hurt Carrie White anymore.
For Carrie, it will be a dream come true. For everyone else, it will be a nightmare. Carrie. A new film by Brian DePalma. Based on the chilling bestseller. Starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and introducing John Travolta in his first motion picture role. If you have a taste for terror, you have a date with Carrie.
I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who have seen Carrie, but just to give a quick rundown, Carrie is about a young woman, Carrie Wright, who's a high school senior, and she is the social outcast and misfit of her class. And the film begins with her after gym class in the shower as all the girls are getting dressed. Carrie's in the shower and she has her first period. and she doesn't actually know what a period is. So she is horrified. She turns to all the other girls, kind of crying and hysterical because she doesn't know what's happening to her. And they respond by taunting her, by throwing tampons and pads at her and saying, plug it up. So she's getting absolutely no sympathy or any help from them. It's only when the gym teacher, Miss Collins, comes in that she tries to calm Carrie down. But in all the chaos, the light in the gym or in the locker room explodes pretty much. And it turns out that actually it's Carrie who's able to move objects with her mind and that she has telekinesis. Following on from that incident, all the girls who took part in making fun of Carrie are punished. And one of the girls, Sue, decides that she wants to make up for what she did to Carrie, whereas another girl, Chris, played by Nancy Allen, who will show up again today, she wants to basically destroy Carrie. She wants to get revenge on Carrie, and because they have to do all these awful detentions, and Chris ends up being banned from going to the senior prom. We learn more about Carrie's home life, and the reason why she didn't know about menstruation is because her mother is this religious fanatic who, when she comes home and tells her mother what happened, says to Carrie that she must be sinful, and the sin of blood is, so basically her period is like this punishment for her, her lustful thoughts or something like that. Moving towards the prom, Sue decides that she wants her boyfriend Tommy Ross to take Carrie to the prom, and Carrie ends up agreeing to go. And then at the prom, Chris and her boyfriend Billy, played by John Travolta, enact their hideous revenge, which is to dump a bucket of pig's blood on Carrie's head as she goes up and accepts the award for, her and Tommy get king and queen of the prom. As the blood falls on her, Carrie pretty much has I guess you could say almost like a psychotic break, and she starts to enact her revenge and ends up burning down the school and killing everyone who is in the auditorium. She then leaves the prom, goes home, and her mom is waiting for her. Her mom tries to kill her, but then she ends up killing her mother, and then they end up both dying as their house starts to fall around them. And then it ends with Sue now pretty much catatonic, and she has this vision and of Carrie kind of still coming for her, and then it ends. So very sad story.
Yeah.
So for me, this was such a formative film. I'm going to ask you first. How did you first see Carrie? Do you remember?
I honestly don't remember. I think it was probably on video, on VHS or on DVD. I just know that I've seen it multiple times. And it would probably, if it was on VHS, it would have been during the time I was just devouring videos from the video shop. Over the course of my life when video shops were a thing. And I probably came to it out of just loving Brian DePalma films, and because it was his first film, wasn't it? Or like it wasn't his first, but it was like his first big hit. And so it was kind of wanting to go back and watch that. Watching it again for this, it's still a banger. And I think we'll talk about RoboCop later, but like RoboCop, it doesn't feel dated, even though it is dated because it was made at a certain time. It just works on every level, I think. Talking about the shower scene at the start, like which is kind of the opening of the film, how DePalma sets it all up as kind of this dreamlike thing with the kind of Vaseline on the lens and almost softcore porn in a way, and then it becomes this nightmarish hellscape, and then that's where this is the movie that we're watching.
And that's DePalma. He always lulls you in with something very titillating and very erotic, and then turns it on its head into something really horrifying. So he plays to your voyeuristic tendencies and then always bites you back with that very thing.
Almost as if to say, like, you know, slap you on the wrist is like, you know, you came here for something else and I'm going to give you this instead.
Yeah. I mean, for me, this was such a formative film when I was a teenager. So I first saw it at a sleepover with a bunch of girls.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And I still remember I think it must have been the daughter of the house who we were staying at, coming in and holding the VHS cover and going, look, and it's rated R. So in Australia it was rated R, which means that you're not supposed to be able to see it if you're under 18, and we would have been, I don't know, 14. So obviously the parents were like, nah, the kids they're going to want to watch Carrie. So awesome parents, whoever they were, I can't remember who it was, and so we were like, oh, my God, we're going to watch an R-rated film. And on the cover, of course, was Sissy Spacek Carrie covered in blood. And I still remember really loving the film and really getting into it. And then I still remember the last scene with Sue and the hand coming out of the ground. Holy shit. We all lost it. There was screaming. We were like pretty much climbing the walls. Like it worked really, really well.
It's still considered one of the best jump scares in cinema, right?
It is.
It's just, and and I mean, these kind of ending jump scares have kind of become cliche now, but I think he kind of really brought it into its own with that.
Yeah. It was just this kind of sting at the end of the film, and it worked really, really well. I still remember it to this day. And it's interesting that I saw it, you know, as a teenage girl with a bunch of other teenage girls, and the film is so much about what it is to be the outcast. I mean, I had, just in high school, I had falling out. Possibly the girls that I saw this film with, I probably ended up having a falling out with at some point, and they probably gave me hell for it. And I think that's the thing, that as I watch Carrie again and again, I do feel immense sympathy for her.
Yeah.
I am totally with her. Like when she starts enacting her revenge, I'm always like, yeah, fucking get him, Carrie. I think they deserve it. But I think also, you know, as you go back to when the film came out, I think, you know, it's one of the key horror films of the 70s. And if you look at horror in the 70s, it's very much in keeping with all the kind of, especially in American cinema of the 70s, you know, with New Hollywood, that really, that there was this complete kind of moral ambiguity with all the characters. I mean, there is this ambiguity around, I guess, with Carrie, that you have the sympathy for her, but then she also just kills a bunch of people. And also you're seeing in this film with a lot of the other kind of horror films of the 70s, I'm thinking like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Last House on the Left, Hills Have Eyes, you know, these really kind of strong, confronting horror films, and they really are about the breakdown of authorities and institutions. So in Carrie, we have this breakdown. We have this very dysfunctional family with Carrie and her mother. We have, you know, the school, and, you know, the religious fanaticism is also key to the family dysfunction. And the school, which is kind of this, is this representation of the state, is breaking down as well. It goes up in flames by the end. And so you have, you know, it's very much part of the modern horror of that time. I also think of like Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist, which were also based on novels that are taking us into the home and exposing or showing all this corruption and evil that is there. It's very much the horror coming home in a lot of these films. Even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you have this very also corrupt family at the center of it. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's all men, and then in Carrie you have these two women. It's also interesting to look at the source novel from Stephen King, which I read just this past week. in preparation.
Sped through that one.
The source novel from Stephen King is set out quite differently. It's set out after the fact of, or after all the events that have happened. And it's this fragmented narrative of taking bits. So you have excerpts, you're seeing, well, you're reading from, Carrie's experiences of the events, but it's kind of intercut, using a film term, with excerpts from a book on telekinesis that was written about Carrie. Also, there was the White Commission after the events to investigate what actually happened. You have Sue Snell, who's written an autobiography. There's excerpts from that. So it's all these different
mixed media.
Yeah, mixed media format throughout the novel, and the film obviously is just showing things in chronological order.
But they were going to do a first draft of the script was adapting it that way.
Yeah,
which I think they were smart not to do that.
No, I think what you find with the film is that it is very much keeping us with Carrie. So in the source novel, Carrie is much less appealing in many, many ways. Well, she's described as being somewhat overweight. She's got acne all over her face and body. She's got this really kind of greasy hair that's always kind of hanging it. So she is certainly much less appealing than you have Sissy Spacek on screen. I mean, Sissy Spacek, she's really interesting in that she's really, really beautiful, but it's not always immediately apparent. She's got this kind of interesting look to her. But yeah, she certainly is appealing. And the fact that, when you see her at the prom, she looks lovely.
All she needed was a dress and a bit of lippy.
Yeah. And so she's much less appealing in the novel, and you're not so much with her, especially towards the end. In the novel, she becomes very much just this vengeful monster on a rampage, and she ends up pretty much destroying the whole entire town in the novel. So she's just this completely unhinged monster, and the book also goes into, because of these excerpts from these books on telekinesis and so on, there's even this discussion of there could be more kids like this out there, and what are we going to do? And it ends on a note of maybe there are other kids out there. So it's much more almost like this scientific study, whereas the film, I think, is very much we're with Carrie the whole entire time.
I think also DePalma said they only focused on the school, because when you're a teenager, school is your whole world. And I guess for budgetary reasons as well, that would make sense. I don't know about the novel, because the movie is very funny when it needs to be as well. Even with all of this stuff going on, it can be quite comedic. And I remember also DePalma saying something about sort of helping create that suspension of disbelief is you give people some comedic moments, something to laugh at. Otherwise, they'll just start laughing at the whole film. And I think that's important to ground the fantastical elements in sort of, because the comedy comes out of just being a kid in high school and the sort of everyday humdrum life of a small town. Yeah, I mean, I think of in the girls' punishment with Miss Collins, the gym teacher, and that weird music. Yeah, there's this weird tone, and also when the boys go for their prom outfits and how it speeds up. So there's this weird kind of. Yeah, you're right. There is definitely these moments to kind of counterbalance a lot of the heaviness, because a lot has been written about this film and how it comes out in the 70s, which is the time of women's liberation, second wave feminism, and so on, And Stephen King even said, Carrie is largely about how women find their own channels of power and what men fear about women and women's sexuality. The book is, in its more adult implications, an uneasy masculine shrinking from the future of female equality. So, yeah, it is this. There's been a lot written about
this aspect of Carrie, of whether it's this feminist text because or is it actually this almost misogynist, which is something that Brian DePalma has had to deal with his whole entire career.
Well, yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you. Do you think it's feminist considering it's men who wrote and directed it, or is it just up to the interpreter?
Well, I mean, to me, I absolutely do feel like it. I think it is. I'm going to go ahead and say it is quite a feminist film. I mean, certainly, it is this whole idea of women's power being linked certainly with menstruation. She gets her power as she gets her first period. She's associated with blood throughout the film. So she's bleeding. Pretty much one of the first times we see her, she's bleeding from her crotch. And then at the prom, she gets covered in blood. So she is always associated with blood and becomes, quite abject in that way, associated with bodily fluids and so on. Her power is used, you could say, for bad. She uses it for revenge and she kills a lot of people. So certainly, there's a lot. I mean, there's the big thing is, one of the big theories of horror and looking at women's representation in particular is Barbara Creed's idea of the monstrous feminine. And so she was investigating a lot of different horror films, and in her book, The Monstrous Feminine, she has a chapter on Carrie where she likens Carrie to a witch, which is a very kind of historical archetype of women being oppressed and otherized. A woman who is transgressive was seen as a witch. And of course there were the witch trials and so on. So you have, for Creed, this idea of the monstrous feminine, which is for her a construction of the patriarchal order, where women are constructed as monstrous and abject as a way to emphasize their difference from men and to kind of as a way to show that women's power is a threat to the social order. So in that respect, that she talks about Carrie and a lot of other horror films, that it is perpetuating negative views about women, and in particular with Carrie, she refers to Carrie as a menstrual monster. That her monstrousness comes with her reproductive cycle, and a lot of the representations around this idea of the monstrous feminine is abjection and monstrosity being linked particularly with women's reproductive cycles. So linked with women's capacity to be a mother, and that this was a way to minimize the power of the mother. The mother is, the person who births you and is the kind of main influence in your life. But to be part of the social order, you've got to reject your mother and go with the kind of patriarchal order, which sees men as the top of the hierarchy. So you want, as one way to oppress women, is to objectify them, to make them just into sexual objects that are there for pleasure, but also you could say, abjectify them, which is linking them with the abject, linking them with the monstrous, and seeing them as these disgusting, horrible creatures that need to be destroyed or at least put into line. So the fact that you have so much of Carrie linked to, there's always been kind of myths and superstitions around menstruation. In the past, women who were menstruating were pretty much had to kind of go away while they were on their period, and then were able to be allowed back. And that it's seen as this disgusting, horrible thing that's shameful and needs to be kept quiet. Also, at the center of the film, you have the relationship with the mother. So the mother is also she is the monster of the film. She's abusive and horrible to Carrie. She tries to kill her at the end, and she's killing, at the end she's stabbing her, and the way Carrie killed her at the end is with there's all these phallic knives and stabbing as the mother dies. She's Piper Laurie kind of has all these almost orgasmic screams. So there is definitely this undercurrent of the film. You can't deny that, a lot to do with women and reproduction and motherhood and menstruation and puberty and this whole idea and women's power is all kind of tied up with this idea of the monstrous. So yes, that is definitely a part of the film that I don't think you can deny. But also at the same time, I think it is this whole thing of that she is repulsive but yet ultimately sympathetic. It goes back to Frankenstein's monster of also being repulsive and sympathetic. The victim, but also the aggressor, the hero and the villain. So I think is that the whole thing is that Carrie is all these different things. And I think also when I talked before about how so many fans identify with the monster, Bridget Cherry has done a lot of investigation into female fans of horror, because I get it all the time. Like, why do you like horror, especially as a woman? How could you possibly like horror? Isn't it all about women being killed and stalked? And I think it's so much more than that. Horror is the one genre where women speak more, where there are more women characters. I think horror as a genre is so tied up.
More women main characters too.
Yes, yeah.
Central protagonists.
Yeah, and I think it's so much about just the female experience, I think, in horror.
Like in Carrie, all the main characters are women, right? Yeah. Like there are men in the film, but none of them really have the spotlight like the women do.
When you think about it, like we've got Sue and Chris, and you've got their boyfriends, Tommy and Billy, and they kind of need the boys to help them with their plans, but they're completely being, I guess, in so many ways, manipulated by.
Yeah, I think the film, while all that stuff you said is very valid, I think the overriding thing for me is about the repression, which is example in Carrie's mother of like, this is the worst case scenario of that. But the school as well, that there's this air of repressed sexuality across the whole thing. Like the PE classes are gender segregated, but they've got this whole prom thing homecoming, whatever it is that they've got going on, which is organised like sexuality. So like they want all the kids to go, and it's this big thing, and the girls are punished by saying you can't go if you don't do these things. But then the teacher who like takes a liking to Carrie and wants to help her she's kind of like, she's trying to get her to change her appearance to be more acceptable. So they're trying to sexualize her, but in the way that's acceptable to society. And I think if you think about the way America was founded on Puritanism, but even though the 70s is considered this time of like of sexual freedoms and all these things, there's still this structure being imposed on everything about sexuality and growing up. So there are certain forms of sexuality and of existence that are acceptable and others that are not. And to Carrie's mother, played by Piper Laurie, is her version is acceptable to her, but is unacceptable to everyone else. But she finds everything else very unacceptable to her because that's too free. And it's all tied up in all of this religious fanaticism. But I think that religious fanaticism underpins the whole thing, because America has that, you think about the League of Decency and all of these things, that censored cinema, and that even with all the freedoms that everybody says that they have now, or that's enshrined in law, there's still this undercurrent through everything.
Yeah, because I think, again, that's so much of DePalma, that he always has this duality and mirroring. You've got the good and bad girls with Sue and Chris, and you've got the good and bad boys with Tommy and Billy, and you also got good and bad mothers. You've got Mrs. White, who actually is right when she says, don't go, they're all going to laugh at you. But she's right for all the wrong reasons, which... Yeah, again, we won't say much about that.
Well, a stop clock is right twice a day.
Yeah. So, yeah, you just always have this, there's never any, you have this duality, but then with DePalma, it's never clear cut good and bad at the same time. And also to your point, I remember there was one line in the film where they say that the only way a girl can go to the prom is if she's asked by a boy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's the other thing,
it's
which
weird.
is fucked. Yeah.
So who's the weirdo now?
Yeah. Yeah, so the whole system is kind of wrong. And
And also that gives rise to Carrie's abilities of like the school and the mother mainly, but the school as well, because she doesn't fit in and everything. And this whole thing, and I mean, this goes to RoboCop as well, is about us, society trying to put order onto the human soul or the human, the person on personhood. And that if you crush it down or you try to give it guardrails or restrict it in a really strict way, it's gonna zig where it should have zagged, or something's got to break at some point, or there's you want, and I mean we're going to talk about RoboCop later, but so I won't say any much about it now. But it's that whole thing of you want to put someone within a box and have them go a certain way, behave a certain way, and it's never going to turn out that way because we're too unpredictable.
And then also that whole thing of. And maybe you can kind of talk a bit about how you, as a young boy, saw the film. But it was interesting when I was looking. So I was looking at my copy of Barbara Creed's *The Monstrous Feminine*, but then I thought I would also look at the other big horror theory book, which is *Men, Women, and Chainsaws* by Carol J. Clover, which. Where the term "the final girl" in slasher movies was coined. And I was just looking at the book, and the intro of the book is called Carrie and the Boys, and a lot of what Clover's argument is about gender, but then she talks about how in a lot of like slasher films in particular, there is this shift in identification, and she does speak as though about primarily the male viewer, and she says that it's mostly young boys who are watching slasher films, which I don't always agree with, although it's hard to kind of refute that claim. But I just think about the teenage or the girls' sleepover and how that's where I watched a lot of horror movies. First watched horror movies. But anyway, Clover mentioned that when Stephen King was talking about the novel and the character of Carrie, he actually said Carrie's revenge is something that any student who has ever had his gym shorts pulled down in phys ed or his glasses thumb rubbed in study hall could approve of. And it's interesting that, something that any student who has ever had his gym shorts pulled down. And so he's talking about, as Carol Clover then says, the boy so threatened and so humiliated, King seems to be saying, is a boy who recognizes himself in a girl who finds herself bleeding from her crotch in the gym shower, pelted with tampons and sloshed with pig's blood at the senior prom. And she goes on, the possibility that male viewers are quite prepared to identify not just with screen females, but with screen females in the horror film world, screen females in fear and pain. So in many respects, is even gender that important? And maybe it is more about just that whole thing of, I keep going back to like what Del Toro was talking before, is that, you identify that a lot of people identify with the outsider. I don't know if to put you on the spot. I don't know. When you watch the film, I don't know if you can remember when you used to watch it. Were you with Carrie? Did you think, oh, she's awful, or?
Oh no, absolutely with Carrie. I mean, she's centered right in the middle of this film. Like she's the point of view character, and I don't think. The girls aren't just girl mean. They're mean. Like you feel like they're horrible to her. I mean, I know what periods are, so I get, but even if I didn't, like you can tell she's upset, and they just start pelting things at her, and they just treat her like absolute garbage, and like anyone can understand that. And then she goes home, and her mother's even worse. Like she's psychologically just destroying this poor young girl, and like locking her in the cupboard with that fucked up San Sebastian figure, which is just nuts, which is nightmare fuel. If the rest of the film isn't that statue, just is. I think about that, but it's just. I think it's. Of course, you can identify with Carrie. I mean, that's like the film is brilliant at engendering that sympathy with her, and the bit where you could struggle with is when she does take her revenge, and I think the film positions you to go, yeah, get him. But you also, in the back of my mind, I kind of go, well, some people there maybe don't quite deserve it. But it's that whole thing of she's told they're all going to laugh at her, and when it happens, she sees them all laughing at her because she's been so scarred by her mother and by everything that's been happening that they may as well have been. And so, and it's kind of like, it's really a cautionary tale about just school kids should show it it should be an anti-bullying PSA. And to say, be a nice kid, like be nice to your fellow students, don't be an asshole, otherwise Carrie gonna come get you.
Yeah, let's talk about the prom. I mean, that whole sequence, which I think is a sizable chunk of the film, is the prom.
Yeah, I think the film's really well paced in getting you to the prom quite quickly, and then DePalma really milks it, and he drags it on. Because the bucket's there. Yeah. He does that Hitchcockian thing because, he loves his Hitchcock, where he shows you the bucket of blood and then you're just waiting for it to go off. And it's the touch of evil thing from Orson Welles. You're just waiting and waiting. And so it's like he moves the film along really quickly, and then the film almost grinds to a halt when you get to and the shots get longer and the scenes get longer, and you're just like, oh my God, just do it. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah. Because there is, when she first arrived, it is all absolute like dream come true. She's with Tommy. Everything goes really well. She looks amazing. All the other kids are suddenly nice to her. And
you can tell she's waiting for the other. She's like, you can tell she doesn't trust it. And it's taking a long time for her to realise, this might actually be for real, which is the heartbreaking thing.
Yes, she finally, and there's that when she's dancing with Tommy and the camera's swirling around her and she's getting so intoxicated. And she's finally, I think, thinking, no, this is all real. And he kisses her and then they get voted prom king and queen. So it is up until that point, it is just this intoxicating fantasy suddenly becoming real, and you almost can't. And it is too good to be true, because then once they're up there and they're crowned king and queen, and then it slows down, and there's all the slow mo and the cutting in between, Chris and Billy and holding on the string of. And then you like you say, it is so excruciating. Yeah. Every time you watch it, you're like, oh no, please.
Just do it already.
Well, part of me is like, no, this time, don't do it this time.
You want Amy Irving to get there on time and stop them.
Yeah. And it's just, it just really, definitely it's the Hitchcockian suspense. And in the film, they changed the name of the town to Bates. So it's Bates High School, and so obviously Norman Bates, and the actual music that you hear whenever Carrie's powers come is the actual
psycho music.
The actual psycho violin music. So there's definitely all the Hitchcockian elements there.
But I did wonder about the prom bit though, and this is something if anyone wants to email us and tell me I'm wrong. I think there's a plot hole where. And it doesn't matter because the film has just got so many things going on, it doesn't matter. But I don't know if there is a scene that tells you that Nancy Allen and John Travolta even know that Carrie's going to the prom. I mean, maybe they just assume it. Maybe they know that Amy Irving told them or something, I don't know. And also they put the bucket of blood up there, and then after that there's a scene where they're putting up bunting, and it's like no one's noticed this bucket of blood sitting in the rafters while they're putting up the decorations for the prom. Anyway, I'm just being nitpicky, but...
Well, I think the whole thing is that because Tommy in particular is so popular that him asking Carrie would have got around.
Yeah, sure, true.
Yeah. And in the novel, there's more of people going to Sue and going, what's going on, or do you know that this is happening? Yeah. So I think
it's fine. It's not. I just thought it was funny. Like I realized that while watching it, because it's like the umpteenth time I've seen it, and it just like it's occurring to me like, oh, there's no actual scene where Nancy Allen finds out that she's even going to be there.
Yeah.
And then she's getting the blood and blah blah blah. But no, it's fine because it doesn't. Who cares? I don't know why I even brought it up, but I just thought it was funny. Yeah.
But I mean, once the blood falls, and you have the screen, the DePalma split screen kicks in, just as her mind, I guess, splits, or as she becomes the monster. But yeah, it's interesting just thinking about, again, when the film came out, this whole idea of, is her revenge justified? And I was thinking in the 70s, there is a lot of vigilante narratives. You've got Taxi Driver, Death Wish, obviously. Also, you've got I Spit on Your Grave. So there is a lot of this vigilantism. I guess it's a symptom of, people just becoming so frustrated and disillusioned with the systems.
A broken system,
Yeah. But then there is this other quite disturbing aspect of Carrie, which Stephen King has talked about, where you could say that Carrie is looking toward the phenomenon now, unfortunately, of school shooters. And a lot of the school shooters are also the ones who are bullied. So and Stephen King has, because he is much more of the opinion that Carrie just becomes this monster and it's quite irredeemable what she does. I'm always like, Carrie, go get him. But there is the whole thing that obviously, she is killing. They were really, really awful, but do they deserve to be, burned alive? You also have Miss Collins, who was always just trying to help her, and she also is seen getting killed. So anyone who may have been sympathetic towards her also gets it as well. I think at that point it's that Carrie's, it's out of control.
She can't control it.
Yeah. So I think that it is this. It's the DePalma thing. It's never cut and dried. It's never clear cut.
And I wonder, and Sue and Tommy, I don't think. They were the ones at least trying to do something nice, but I suppose Sue was doing it just to clear her own conscience. It was like she had to do the bad thing before she realized she needed to do the good thing. And it's like, does that matter that even though she didn't, it took being bad to her to make her do something good. And Tommy was only doing it because Sue was telling him to. But I think he genuinely felt good about what he was doing. And when he was at the prom, he seemed to be having a nice time with her. And I don't think he was like being sneaky or snarky, doing it in any sarcastic way. I think he genuinely enjoyed seeing the look on her face. So, but it arose out of them doing her dirty, or at least Sue. Yeah. And I don't know, does that mean are they equally deserving of it or not? I don't know. But I just feel like they at least were trying to make something good out of a bad situation and treat her, be the first people to treat her well, because at least Sue was the only one who went, oh shit, we really fucked up here. Yeah. And she realised it. Yeah. No one else did.
I guess it's the whole thing of people doing awful things and giving them the space to atone for that.
Well, I did write a note when we were watching it that Carrie does exercise ultimate cancel culture, doesn't she? Even those who gave a mea culpa end up getting it in the neck. It's like, it's that whole thing of, well, you could say you've grown and you've learned, but it doesn't matter, I'm going to telekinetically destroy you now. So, it's that whole thing of cancel culture, right? Of like, I guess you grade it on a level of like how bad the thing you did is. Yeah. But if you said some stupid shit in 2010 online and 14 years later you come out and say, I said some stupid shit in 2010, I'm really sorry about that, and I understand what, and you apologize and you say you've grown and you've understand it and you've, I guess, demonstrated that you've grown, then maybe you should be given another chance. Yeah. But if you've done something, if you've abused somebody or done, there's no forgiving that. So, but Carrie has no barometer for any of that because she's just out for blood.
She's born too soon.
But also I think because it's that, but you're talking about the school shooter thing, not everybody deserves it, but these people aren't born in a vacuum either. And it's that whole nature versus nurture thing. And it's that gaining of power that is irresistible. And I think even if Carrie is not quite in control of it, it might be that she's feeling so powerful in that moment that even in the back of her mind, if she knows what she's doing is wrong, that power feels too good.
And there's one thing is like once it goes unchecked, it just, there's no controlling it. Yeah. That's a good note to leave it on, I guess. So, let's move on to our next film. So we're going to talk about Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop.
All Detroit has a cancer. The cancer is crime.
We need a self-sufficient law enforcement robot.
How long will it take?
We can go to prototype within 90 days.
Where are you from?
Metro South.
Welcome to hell.
All units, sector 9.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me.
You're gonna be a bad mother.
Half man.
This guy is really good.
Half machine.
RoboCop. What is he?
He's a cyborg, you idiot.
All hero.
What are your prime directives?
Protect the innocent. Let the woman go, or there will be trouble. Uphold the law. You are under arrest.
What is this shit?
Justice gets an upgrade.
Looking for me? Your move, creep.
RoboCop.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
So remind people what RoboCop is, Liam.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Well, hello, it's RoboCop. I mean, who, at least probably in our audience, hasn't seen RoboCop by this point? If you haven't, I'm very jealous because you get to watch it. If you go watch it now, it's gonna be amazing. Well, for those not in the know, RoboCop is a wonderful 80s action satire directed by Paul Verhoeven, and it is set in futuristic Detroit, where crime is running rampant and the police can't do anything about it. They're being overrun. The streets are overrun with criminals. And they're so low on funds because the city can't pay for the police anymore that a company called Omni Consumer Products, OCP, has come in and is funding the police. So basically the police have become privatized. They have this wonderful plan to build a robotic police officer because you can save money not having to pay salaries and pensions and things like that by just building and maintaining robots. Their first go at it, Ed 209, is an absolute disaster. And then a new upstart in the company says, I have this new program, basically the RoboCop program, but they need a human. They can't seem to figure out how to make a fully robotic policeman. They feel like they need to create a cyborg, have a human element in the robot, but they just need a candidate. So enter Alex Murphy, played by Peter Weller, and he gets very violently killed by a group of criminals and is declared dead, but his body and brain are used to build RoboCop, the future of law enforcement. He then is sent out onto the streets to clean up the town because OCP also want to build a new utopian community called Delta City, and they need to clean up the streets in order to do that. But RoboCop finds out about the men who killed him, and the human part of RoboCop, the Murphy part, decides to get revenge on the criminals. And then that leads him to realize that OCP are actually running the criminal gangs as well, or at least paying them. So they're, in a true capitalist way, they're causing the problem and selling the solution at the same time. And so RoboCop now needs to go up against the people who created him, but they've programmed him to not be able to do that. So he has to figure out a way to get them back while also regaining his humanity.
It was really interesting watching this film with today's topic in mind. And as I was watching it, I was struck with the Frankensteinian elements, the Frankensteinigans that are happening in the film. You have this creation that's made up of dead parts, but also you have this introduction of these machine and technological elements. Yeah. So it's almost like an updating of a lot of what was happening in Frankenstein. And I was also struck at one conversation with Dick Jones and the Miguel Ferrer character. I can't remember. He's Bob
Morton.
Bob Morton, and he refers to RoboCop as a bastard creation and an unholy monster. So what were your thoughts? Were you kind of struck by some of the Frankensteinian elements?
Well, I think when we first decided to do, we thought, we have to do an episode about movies from the creature, quote unquote, point of view. I immediately thought of this film because there's it actually literally uses point of view shots from Murphy's perspective, but also it's about the perspectives of the other characters around him and how in how he's viewed. Being part man, part machine, it makes him a creature caught between worlds. And you get that struggle of between his programming and his soul. What makes him human? What makes him a machine? And are these two things? These two things are in constant conflict. And I suppose in the Frankensteinian way, it's that the monster or the creature is trying to find his personality, his personhood, his agency in the world when he's sort of a creature that didn't exist before. He was a bit of a whole bunch of parts, and now he's this new thing. And what does that mean for, can he have a life? Can he have a relationship? Can he have all these things? But whereas, RoboCop is Alex Murphy, but they try to take that away from him and just have him be this robotic police. But it's that memory and that point of view that keeps coming back and makes him not the thing OCP wants to be, but more the thing that his partner Lewis, played by Nancy Allen from Carrie, also chewing bubblegum in both films. Let's mention that. She is his guide back towards his humanity. It's that push and pull of the technology and the human that is, I think, really appealing in that way.
Yeah, and there's the absolute sympathy that you have for him. And yeah, he's definitely this transgressive being that he did die, and then he's brought back to life with technology. And throughout the film, there is this, this view of other people that he's not human. Certainly OCP are trying to keep the scientists are like trying to get rid of as much of the human part of him, because they want just a machine that doesn't have to eat and sleep and can just always do the job. And what's also interesting about the film is this aspect of labor as well that's so central. The police are always threatening to go on strike. And I just remember there's the one exchange when they first see RoboCop is someone goes, "This guy is really good," and someone replies, "He's not a guy, he's a machine." And then they start talking about this guy, this thing is going to replace us. So he is created and made to not be human in many ways, to make up for the flaws of humans in that, they need time off and they need to be paid. And this threat that certainly still exists today when you think about generative AI and so on, of we're going to be replaced, that we're also the means to kind of destroy us or replace us is being created, but with these intentions, I guess, for profit. And so there's this interesting kind of capitalistic, anti-capitalism message, I think, that is so strong in RoboCop as well. And a lot has been written about the Frankenstein monster being made, the proletariat and so on. So, there's some really kind of interesting aspects to the film about, what it's saying about the nature of humanity, and also the use of technology and could it create monsters that will destroy us?
Yeah, and we can see that now with AI, and you've already, in the decades that have between that film coming out and now, there's been automation within industries and things which has seen the reduction of jobs, and people wonder, there's always a high unemployment and things at certain times because companies want to cut out, make more profit and cut out the bottom line by reducing the workforce and having just robots do everything, or out of money saving and just wanting to create more profit and more production for less money that they put in. It makes, and also RoboCop is with OCP wanting to create They wanted to reduce the employees to just task completing machines, and there's other things that they call RoboCop. They call him a product and a program. They infantilize him he eats baby food, but they basically say he has to eat that just to keep his organic parts fresh. So because that's the only way the machine will work, and it's like they would rather not have to do that. They would rather have like Ed 209 be fully robotic. But what's interesting about the RoboCop universe is that there's all this technological advancement, but there's no any full robotic machine breaks down in some way. But RoboCop's the only way it's worked, and it's because of this human element, which is the element that they want to remove, but they can't seem to do that and make it work. RoboCop, he's a future of law enforcement because he represents an attempt by the corporation to take out the human element, so they unquestionably follow directives. And when you talk about now, like defunding the police and all of these sorts of things, well, what they want is they want to reduce any decision making whatsoever and restrict that humanity to just being mere programming, because OCP have a goal in mind and they just want that goal fulfilled, and they don't want anyone trying to do that in any other way than the way that they want. So they create these directives for RoboCop. It actually makes me think of, if you think of a more recent thing, is the TV show Severance, about how they want, you can have your memories when you're at home, you can live your life. You don't remember your work, but when you're at work, you don't remember your home life. Yeah. And it's that whole thing of we don't want your home life, your personal life, to interfere with your work life. So we just want to remove the human element from you altogether.
Just be a worker, be a product.
Yeah, be a product. But so they put these directives in for RoboCop. So it's serve the public trust, protect the innocent, and uphold the law. And these are very. You would think that these are very, you could interpret these in any certain way, but they also bring in a classified fourth directive, which is any attempt to arrest a senior officer of OCP results in shutdown. So basically that means OCP can commit as many crimes as they want. RoboCop can't arrest them. So also to the whole idea of predatory capitalism being one law for us, one law for everybody else. And it also brings to mind me as well, Isaac Asimov, the sci-fi writer who came up with the laws of robotics, which were: a robot must not harm a human or allow a human to come to harm through inaction. A robot must obey orders given to them by a human unless those orders conflict with the first law. And then a robot must protect its own existence as long as doing so doesn't conflict with the first or second law. So it's basically putting guardrails into effect if robots were to become sentient, or not sentient, but intelligent enough to do more things than just basic actions. But because we're the creators of the robots, we can't have them turning against us. So that's why. So it's the whole idea of putting those guardrails in place. But the thing with RoboCop is that he has this humanity which he's clinging on to, which makes him unpredictable. And so when you get into the film, when he starts to go out into the streets, he's doing all this cool stuff, but like in extreme ways. So he goes to stop a guy robbing a convenience store and just destroys the convenience store in the process, and then says, "Thank you for your cooperation. Good night," and just leaves. He goes to find the two guys trying to rape a woman, and he like shoots her between her legs, but the guy who's got her shoots him in the dick. And it's like,
I always loved that scene.
It's great.
Watching this film as a kid, I used to be like, yeah.
But what's funny is that cops love this movie, probably for all the wrong reasons, because they're like, don't you just some days want to shoot a guy in the dick? But he's doing, this is like, basically these are based on the three directives that he's been given, and that's how he's, I guess, interpreting them. But then when he starts to dream and he sees Clarence Boddicker shooting him and the guys shooting him, and he also remembers bits from his family life of his wife and his kid, he then just he gets up and he marches off. Lewis catches him in the hallway, and she knows he's Murphy because at the beginning of the film, before he gets killed, he's like spinning his gun because his kid loves the way a TV superhero, TJ Laser, does it on the TV. So he started doing it for his kid, and he says every boy needs a role model to look up to. And then when she meets RoboCop for the first time, she sees him spinning his gun, and she's just like, "That's Murphy," which is another great use of POV because she's his link to his human self. And her seeing that is a great callback because that starts that connection. And she meets him in the corridor, and she's like, "You're Murphy, you're Murphy." And he's trying to reject those memories and everything. And he says to her, I have to go somewhere there is a crime happening. And it's kind of him trying to go into RoboCop mode and not think about this stuff, but he's still drawn by these images. So then he goes out and he finds one of the guys that killed him, Emil, at the gas station in an amazing action scene, which looks very, very dangerous to shoot. The explosions in that scene are nuts. And him capturing him, and he records him because he's like, I know you. And he recognizes him because he says, dead or alive, you're coming with me, which is a line he tells him before he gets killed. Anyway, long story short, that leads him to go and download the files of the whole criminal gang. And then that's when he sees that they killed Alex Murphy, and Lewis has told him that he's Murphy. And that's where the movie actually kicks into high gear, and actually the movie starts, because he goes out and just absolutely destroys this criminal underworld, like from top to bottom, obliterates it. But it's all driven by his need to find out who he really is. And that's your character through line for that whole movie. And it's all revenge. And revenge is a very human impulse. It's not a robotic impulse.
And it goes back to Frankenstein. It's the whole thing. The monster is that whole thing of you can only kick a dog so many times before it bites back. Like the death scene of Murphy is just really awful. Yeah. It's torturous and terrible. And then he's being manipulated. But yeah, it's just that whole thing of you being victimized and then turning around and wanting revenge for the bad that's been done to you.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, unlike Carrie, where you're kind of questioning, should she be doing this? In RoboCop, it's like, no, you kill those fuckers. Like, and when he's killed, those guys are having, like, he's so violently murdered, and those guys are having a great time doing it, which just makes them even more evil. And you just know they're going to get it, and you want them to die in the most horrible way possible. And with Clarence Boddicker, he just gets thrown through so many windows. I mean, and that's not even the point where he gets killed, because there's a big, of course, in a great bit of screenwriting, the big finale when he finally gets his revenge on all those guys is back in the steelworks where they killed him the first time round. So he gets to have that revenge in the place where he was kind of created. But then, of course, he realizes that the people who built him are actually ultimately responsible. And that creates a whole new level of conflict, because he's programmed not to kill or arrest an OCP executive. Again, his revenge is guardrailed, he's still restricted, but it comes at that finale when, so he at that point, Directive 4, when he goes to arrest Dick Jones, he finds out he can't. He gets attacked by an Ed 209, but then the police have kind of been told that he's gone rogue, that he can't be, that his program has malfunctioned, and the police come after him. His own people try to destroy him, and that's kind of the mob, the villagers in Frankenstein, right, coming to destroy the monster. And then Lewis gets him away. They go to the steelworks, and he takes his helmet off, and he's like, "You're not going to like what you see." And then you see for the first time his face without the helmet on, and he kind of becomes. He's at this point, he's no longer Murphy. He's no longer RoboCop, but he's still not Murphy. He's this liminal being. He kind of exists. That's when you really see that he's existing in these two different worlds.
But I think that's such a highly sympathetic moment where he talks about his family, and he has the line, "I can feel them, but I can't remember them." And it's just, and then there's a bit where I think he even says, like, "I want to be alone," and Lewis just walks off, and then there's this kind of wide shot, and it's just him just sitting there, and it's just like, so it is that moment, I think, of humanity. But yet, you're talking about, getting this revenge, and the film is so, like, graphically violent.
So violent.
Verhoeven really made a very kind of conscious effort to go hard with the violence. And Boddicker and his gang are just really awful, and the way they kill him is really awful. But what I really like about the film is that ultimately the main villain is OCP and is the corporation. Yeah. But yet, going back to this idea of him going for his revenge, how does that sit with Verhoeven's thing about this being a Jesus story?
Well, he's an American Jesus, so of course American Jesus is going to get revenge on those who killed him. It's like there's that SNL sketch with Christoph Waltz where he's like, it's a trailer for a Jesus movie where it's like a Django Unchained, but he's Jesus. Yeah, and it's like that's the American thing, right? And I think because they talk about. Verhoeven is like a scholar of Jesus. Yes, like he's written books about it. He's all into it, and that was one of his entry points into this. Is like, he's an American Jesus with a gun, and if you think about it, like he's violently killed by criminals. He's remade by a corporation, and using his powers gets revenge on those criminals, and then he gets revenge on OCP because Dick Jones he gets fired by the chairman, so him getting fired allows the directive to not mean anything anymore, so then he can kill Dick Jones, which is beautiful. It's so elegant and really funny. I think that's you could say that's an American Jesus story of like resurrection through technology by a corporation getting revenge on those who wronged you. I don't know, but I can see what he means by like this Americanism, this American version of that sort of story. Because
I think we were watching that really great documentary series called RoboDoc, which is all about the making of the film, and he talks about the moment towards the end of the film where he finally kills Boddicker, and the whole thing is he's walking across water. But then I think I can't remember exactly what he says, but this whole thing of like, he's walking across water, but then he kills Boddicker, and he says something like, that's American Jesus. Yeah. That he's walking on water, he's doing this miraculous thing, but he's still, and then he ends up killing Boddicker, and there's that whole thing where he reaches up and kind of stabs at Boddicker, and this blood just plops on him. Yeah, like water out of a bag. It's such a great, and I think it was an effect that didn't quite work, but I think it worked. It actually looks brilliant. Yeah. So you have all this graphic over-the-top violence. Also, throughout the film, you have all this. I mean, it's very much, I think, satire is so much of Verhoeven's work is, but you have the ads and the news reports and media breaks and so on, and they're so integral to the film. Yeah. And they really say a lot about, society at the time of like the 80s. It's very much lampooning Reagan's America, which, if you don't know much about that, it was all seen as this. It was the morning in America. It was like everyone felt great. Economy was up. We were still fighting the communists. Everything felt great. But what it really was, it was built upon bodies of dead people and the marginalization of the poor and racism and all of this stuff, all the dark stuff is like was propping up this utopia, which is why when Ed 209 is being shown off at the beginning of the film and they ask one of the junior executives to hold a gun so they can demonstrate what Ed 209 can do, and Ed 209 malfunctions and he just destroys this guy with his massive machine guns, and it's so graphic. The squibs on that guy just go up, like front and back going off. And I remember watching this film as a kid, and I remember watching the R-rated version at the time, and it was quite graphic. But then when you watch the director's cut, it goes on even like a little bit longer, and it's even worse. But what my point is that he gets thrown back and lands on the model for Delta City, this new thing that OCP want to create. So it's like a utopia built in blood. And that's Reagan's America. And that's what it's lampooning. But it's also, I always say, when a film's ahead of its time, it's great news for the film and bad news for the rest of us, because nothing's changed enough that the film is no longer relevant. And RoboCop is still relevant because, especially at the time of this recording, Trump has just won the election again in 2024. And the whole thing of him wanting to bring Elon Musk in to they're basically saying that he's going to Muskify Washington, D.C. And I just think of OCP. And I just think that bringing in corporations to do the government's work is never good. And but then all these commercials and stuff are things like they've got, was it the 6000 SUX car? They've got the Nukem. I love the Nukem game, which is like Battleship, but it's about like nuking other countries. Yep. And it's just, it's absolutely hilarious, but it's also like really dark, and it makes you think, oh God, are we really this bad? And it's kind of this, and
it's really, really well done. And I think when all of this stuff was written to the script, I think Ed Neumeyer and Michael Miner were really clever in doing this. And I know Verhoeven would say to them, tell me why this is funny, because he didn't quite understand some of the American humor. But I think once he was kind of explained to him, he knew exactly what it meant. And I think that's why he was such a great director for this, because, and they say this a lot in that RoboDoc, is that you needed a non-American director to come in and make this film, because you needed someone who wasn't all tied up in all of that sort of stuff, who could see it from the outside and really nail that satire.
And I think also of the news reports that you get, and like news is very much being packaged as entertainment. And one of the hosts of the news report is Lisa Givens, who I remember being on Entertainment Tonight. So she was an entertainment reporter. And so the way they deliver the news, it's just so like bright and smiley. And they mention things around the world, and there's all these awful wars and things going around the world. And then at one point in the film, is it like a satellite falls and kills people, including 2 ex-presidents?
Yes. Yeah.
But then they talk about the police, and they're like, oh, just when you see a policeman, give them a smile. And it's just all very like the tone of how they're delivering the news, these awful news, is just all packaged as this is all entertainment.
Yeah. And kind of this stuff happens so all the time that it kind of it's not like people stop and go, oh, let's commemorate this event, or let's have a minute of science. So, oh yeah, a satellite fell out of orbit and crushed a bunch of presidents. Anyway, let's move on to the next story. Like there's just so much crazy stuff going on that we don't even blink anymore.
And it all just becomes, it's the whole flatlining of just so much awful things.
Yeah.
But and it almost, people, I guess, not even really thinking about it, and just thinking about really what's what can I buy in the next commercial break? What am I gonna, what products are out there? Which brings me to Ed 209. So Ed 209 is so shit. Yeah. But hilarious. And I think that at one point they even, again, Dick Jones keeps saying, it doesn't work, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we're going to sell it. Going to sell millions of units.
Yeah, so it's all thing of like, we're going to sell this thing to the military. We know it's terrible. Like there's the whole bit where Ed 209 is walking, and then it comes to the stairs.
Yeah,
and
it can't use stairs. Yeah.
So it's the whole thing of like the OCP know that they're selling crap.
Yeah.
So it's just this whole thing of, it's just so much about how can they take over everything, and how can they do it to make the most money possible with no thought of anyone, of quality, of how anyone's life is going to be. Because also there's the whole thing of Boudica is brought into line towards then, where you're like, oh, we're going to build Delta City. Well, we're going to need someone to run all the drugs. Yeah. And the prostitution and so on. So baked into this utopia is they're already like, but how can we also make money on this other illegal stuff? Yeah. They're in control of everything.
Well, because it comes out of, I think, Dick Jones does say about Ed 209 is that, he says at one point to Boudica, he says, we're basically the military. And the whole military-industrial complex thing is like, sell a faulty product like Ed 209, and then when it breaks, they're going to have to come to us for the parts. So then you're not just selling them one unit, you're selling them spare parts for the rest of that unit's usability, however long that is. So they're almost like they're building in flaws in order to just keep the money coming in. And the thing with the Delta City and with Jones running the gangs, essentially, is they don't quite mention in the film, but you kind of gather that they want to build the old man. He's just called the old man, the chairman of OCP. He has this vision to build Delta City on the ruins of old Detroit. But in order to do that, they need to clean up the streets, because no one's going to want to move to a new neighborhood that's just filled with gangs and violence. So, and the cops aren't doing the job. So they're like, well, we'll buy the cops and then we can clean up the streets and we can build this city. But what Dick Jones realizes is, well, once you own the cops, you don't want to clean up crime, because then you're not going to get any more contracts to run the police anymore. So you need to sell. In order to sell the solution, you've got to create the problem. And again, that's almost like the Ed 209 thing of like, you want the product to be faulty, so then you just keep getting paid to fix it. And so it's this perpetual loop. So Jones doesn't want to. So he wants to give the old man his utopia, but he also wants to secretly create this underworld so he can keep getting the city contracts for the police, because otherwise you don't want to solve any problems, because then you're not going to make any money anymore.
So I guess it's like, that's America, but that's also late stage capitalism.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And I think you could say that this film is the first part of an unofficial trilogy, because I remember we once went to the Prince Charles Cinema and they played a triple bill of RoboCop, Total Recall and Starship Troopers. So there are all these science fiction films that Paul Verhoeven made, and there is, when you see them all together, you really do see a lot of the same elements throughout the different films. I think they pretty much all start with some kind of ad or the media break or the news report. Pretty sure all three of them.
I know Starship Troopers does. I think Total Recall maybe.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but it's something about the whole Mars thing, right?
Yeah.
And I mean that's the thing, and they all feel like they take place in the same universe, like that. They that RoboCop is maybe the start of it, and then later on in the future, you Total Recall's happening, and then even further in the future, Starship Troopers is happening. And I mean, you talk about how good he is at this, like American satire. Like Starship Troopers is, I remember seeing that going to the cinema as a 15-year-old and thinking it was kind of shit. And just like, oh yeah, it's an action movie. It doesn't really do much for me. And then when I grew older and got a bit more knowledgeable about worldly events and history, it's all about fascism and about the Nazis. And he has been on record saying, I wanted to make a film where the Nazis were the main character, while undercutting all of that, because he grew up during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands, so he knows all about that stuff. And but he wanted to do it from the Nazi point of view and show how kind of ridiculous they were behind all the horror and the bloodshed. So he did it with Starship Troopers, and it completely went over the heads of so many people.
I mean,
including myself when I first saw it, I'll admit.
Now people have kind of, I guess, get it, but then I don't know, we're sliding into fascism right now.
I know.
But it was a bit too subtle. He definitely has been able to see, America in such a distinct way, and it is the fact that he's used science fiction as the genre through which to make these kind of really important, I guess, statements.
Well, science fiction's the best vehicle for these sorts of things, because you can be subtle, but you could not be not subtle. You could use a sledgehammer rather than a scalpel on these points, because you're putting it within this certain context and playing around with it. Because you can show things in the extreme. You can show society in the extreme. And Ed Neumeier, one of the co-screenwriters of this film, is on record talking about how influenced he was by things like Judge Dredd and heavy metal, like these comic books and magazines, which were all about or Judge Dredd as well, being society and extremists. And then Michael Miner, the other co-writer, saying he was all very heavily into Philip K. Dick, which was also about, take this element of society and let's blow it up into its weirdest conclusion. And also Ed Neumeier saying he was on the set of Blade Runner. And so working as like an extra, as a gopher on the set of Blade Runner when that was being made. So there's all of that DNA in RoboCop. And it's what's so good about, what I love about science fiction is and what's so good about especially the ones by Paul Verhoeven is it can be really silly, but it can also really hit home and be very truthful as well.
And it's that whole thing of the dystopia, and any vision of the future is totally saying something about the time and place in which it was made. And yet, as you said before, also it can be very prescient, which is an unfortunate thing for us. But
because I think in the 80s it was really when people started to take note of how kind of out of control capitalism was going. And again, about the Reagan thing, like they were, everyone was saying everything was great, nothing to worry about. And this film came out 87, which is, and then there was a stock market crash in 87, I think, when everything, like in 2008, which is the one that we've most recently, well, it's not that recent anymore, but the one that that we can remember. So it's this whole thing of this lie agreed upon until the truth hits home that things aren't actually very good. But it's that capitalism is all about pretending everything is fine, and then everything will be, apparently.
Yeah, and also the fact that the influence of Judge Dredd, which comes from Britain, and of course in Britain there was Thatcher.
Yeah.
So, there's definitely this.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, what was happening in the 80s is definitely being reflected, certainly in the science fiction films. You just watch them now, but from a 2024, 2020s lens, it all feels so familiar.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting how the British science fiction, like Judge Dredd and look at 1984, it's all about government becoming sort of overreaching and becoming authoritarian. And in America, it's about corporations, which I think is quite telling because it's like corporations become more powerful than governments. I mean, you can see that with the whole idea of like hedge funds and hedge fund managers and things like that. Like, and also I was thinking about with this, we watched that show Billions, with Damian Lewis as this hedge fund manager. There's a whole subplot in one of the seasons where he basically takes on the debt of a whole town and then basically just starts cancelling their services and things because he's not making any money. He thought he could make, he was going to build all this new stuff in the town. It all went sideways, so he basically destroys the town financially because he knows he's not going to get any money from it. And these things are happening, where some individuals have a greater wealth than the GDP of an entire nation.
And this whole thing of privatization, which here in the UK, it's ruined a lot of things. Like try getting a train that runs on time. So, yeah, we're not listening to our science fiction.
No, that's the problem.
Yeah. They're fun, but if we could also if someone could take on board, someone who could do something about it. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Well, I think actually that's part of it. I think we get to exercise all this stuff watching these films so we don't tackle it in real life. It's almost like a bad byproduct of that. Like the whole thing of, Disney owns Star Wars and Disney's this massive corporation but yet we love Star Wars about these scrappy rebels going up against this dark empire that wants to take over everything. Well, Disney's taking over everything, at least in terms of intellectual product and creative content and stuff. But it's like, we can side with the rebels in the movies, but then when it comes to real life, we don't really feel like we've got any power to fight back.
Yeah.
If I want to get really dark with it.
Yeah. I know, and then you also get people who are like, "Oh, don't make these things political," when they so obviously very much are.
Yeah. But speaking of the mainstream stuff, when RoboCop came out, it was like a #1 film. It was a huge hit. And did create there was a bunch of sequels and there's a TV series and toys and everything. But it was a massive success. But what's great about it is I think it still endures. Like it was a big blockbuster film that is still amazing and you get into it as a kid thinking, oh, RoboCop, robot, awesome. And then you watch it, maybe you're a bit too young to watch it and it's very violent and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then as you grow up with the film, you start to realize like how smart and satirical it all is, which you don't pick up when you're quite young when you're first watching it and you're just watching it so it works on the basic aesthetic level, on an action movie level, and then on a satirical level. And the screenwriting is insanely good, like unbelievably good. It just every single level of that movie just works. And it still works. And it doesn't feel, and it feels very 80s, but that is kind of the point as well. It's an 80s movie about the 80s. It's just great.
Yeah. We've got two just straight up classics today, which is good. Yeah. Is there anything else?
We didn't talk much about the making of RoboCop, but the RoboCop suit by Rob Bottin is like an amazing work of art. He'd done all the VFX for The Thing, and the Howling. He was this cracked genius. It's a shame on that RoboDoc that he wasn't on that. I think he's still alive, right? It's a shame he wasn't on it. He doesn't want to talk about it. That's fine. But also Phil Tippett, who in that documentary is called Stop Motion Legend, which he is. He did all the stop motion work for Ed 209 and all of that. The matte painting, like the craft of this film as well. Like I talked about how it works on every level. the craft of this film is phenomenal. And it's also interesting to note that Peter Weller did all this movement coaching to be RoboCop, and then when he got in the suit, he could barely move in it. So they had to reimagine how he moved in the suit. But when you watch it, you can't imagine him moving in any other way, like the robotic movements where the head moves and then the body, and then using all the sound effects, which were actually just the sound effects of Betamax video players winding up and turning on and off to do the voot, 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 like just, and it won an Oscar for sound effects, and the Basil Polidorus score, which I was humming at like just on a pure, the craft of this film, everything about it is just, it was the right time, right place for everybody involved. Everyone's firing on all cylinders. Peter Weller's great, Nancy Allen's great, Kurtwood Smith, God, I can't remember the actor who plays Dick Jones. I'm blanking on his name now. Ronnie Cox, Ray Wise, Dan O'Hurley. There's Twin Peaks alums in there. Yep. It's a phenomenal film, and it's one of those like lightning in a bottle things, and it's just great. So yeah, that's the other thing I want to say. Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me. Just going back to Carrie, if we're talking about little trivia things. One thing I found out in my research into Carrie is that the casting for Carrie was happening at the same time as Star Wars. Oh. And that Carrie Fisher and Melanie Griffith also read for Carrie, and Amy Irving read for Princess Leia. So anyway, just this little tidbit I forgot to mention there.
Oh, also, the other tidbit I wanted to say is that United Artists were the studio behind Carrie, and then when Michael Cimino made Heaven's Gate when was that?
1980?
79, 80? It was such a monumental flop. United Artists tanked, and it didn't exist anymore. But out of the ashes rose Orion Pictures, who made RoboCop.
Oh, there you go.
So there you go.
So a lot of connections, not just a Nancy Allen connection.
Yeah,
she's good. It's so good in both films, and she's such a horrible, nasty bitch in Carrie, and then in the interviews in RoboDoc, she's
so happy to talk about
it. She's so lovely. She seems like the nicest. Anyway, but yeah, so we move on to our honourable mentions.
Sure.
You go first.
You know what I'm going to say. It's an X-Files episode I want to talk about.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah. What's the X-Files honorable mention?
So in the much maligned 7th season, there's an episode, which is, I think it's written by Vince Gilligan, who went on to do Breaking Bad and all that, because he cut his teeth on the X-Files. It's called Hungry, and we're talking about the point of view of the creature. And this episode is all from the point of view of the creature, who's this young man who works at a fast food joint at the drive-through. But I think the only way you can describe him is he's a human shark. But because he has the pointed teeth, he's completely bald, he has black eyes, but he puts on a wig and contact lenses and dentures to hide all of that because he's ashamed. He's ashamed of being this creature because he craves human flesh, specifically human brains. And it's almost like an eating disorder. So he goes to like an eating disorder support group. He has a social worker. At every turn, he's trying not to give in to his cravings. But then, of course, he comes up against this complete asshole, who treats him poorly, bullies him, and in true Carrie style, he kills him. He eats his brain. But what's really good, what makes it the point of view of the character is typically in an X-Files episode, you have a cold open where you see what's going to happen, and then you follow Mulder and Scully as they investigate the crime or the event. In Hungry, it's all from his point of view. So you open with him, you stay with him. You only ever see Mulder and Scully when they come to question him or when they're floating around and talking to other people at the fast food restaurant. And then at the very end, they have he has the inevitable confrontation with them. And it's the only time that they've really ever done that, or at least it was the first time, where you only ever experience the episode from the point of view of the monster of the week, basically. And it makes you care for him because he doesn't want to be doing these things, but he's born that way, and he can't help himself. And it's got a very sad ending, and you actually feel a lot of empathy for the creature.
All right. My first recommendation, I wanted to highlight another great 70s horror master, which is George A. Romero and his film Martin.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. So it's a different take on the vampire story where you have this young man who believes he's a vampire it's kind of murky. It's in some ways because he goes to stay with family members, and this older family member also believes that he's a vampire, and you see what might be flashbacks to him, decades, many years before as a vampire. But then you also see just him attacking women and killing women, and so it becomes unclear as to whether maybe he is a vampire, or he probably is more likely to be this very, very disturbed young man who is pretty much a serial killer of women. And I think the film is excellent in that it is definitely putting you in the monster's perspective, and it isn't shying away from the awful, monstrous things. In some senses, I guess you can kind of say you have a bit of sympathy, but it's just the sympathy that you have that you are starting to kind of understand him in some ways. But it definitely isn't just completely like letting him off the hook, and it isn't, certainly is the kind of complete opposite to the idea of the romantic vampire. He has all these very, very clear like sexual hang-ups about women that he's kind of channeling through this whole idea of, I'm a vampire. So I think it's such incredible and disturbing film that puts you definitely in the giving you the perspective of the monster.
Yeah, that's such a great film. We're going to be talking about Brian DePalma films because this came up recently for me because it's celebrating its 50th anniversary. Phantom of the Paradise. Because I do think that that's got a POV element to it, a Frankensteinian element to it, because the Phantom himself, I think it's all through his point of view, because and like RoboCop, it's a satire, but it's a satire of the music industry, and it's all from the character of the Phantom, who is a struggling songwriter who writes this amazing work, which is stolen by an evil record producer played by the amazing Paul Williams, who also wrote the music for the movie. Our poor songwriter gets crushed by a record press and he gets disfigured, so he has to put on this operatic mask, and it's basically Phantom of the Opera but with pop music. And he's this deformed creature who has to try and get his revenge for the way he's been treated by the villainous songwriter. The other link being Sissy Spacek was in the art department of Phantom of the Paradise before she became an actor, and that's the link with Brian DePalma.
Another honourable mention from me. So one of the things that has become very apparent over the last, decade or so, going back to this idea of the monstrous feminine that I talked about earlier, is that there are a lot of women directors making horror films that I think are speaking to very directly this idea of the monstrous feminine.
I know where this is going.
Well, there's many ways it can go, because it seems like French women in particular are making a lot of films that are playing with this idea of monstrosity. How many do we have? One more honourable mention after this?
You can have another one, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I think, the first instance of this happening, I think if you go back to, actually, I don't remember the exact year that Trouble Every Day by from Claire Denis comes out. I think it's the early 2000s, 2001 or 2003 possibly. And in that film, you have slightly kind of Jekyll and Hyde type of story where it's these scientists that seem to have done some kind of experiments on themselves, and they've been infected with something. And you have Vincent Gallo on his honeymoon, who seems to be fighting a particular urge, and you've got Beatrice Dahl, who's just kind of given over to it completely, very kind of feral. And you have this whole thing of, it's always this idea of, I love you so much I could eat you, that as they become, sexually aroused, that they actually can't stop themselves. It becomes out of control, and they start literally devouring the person that they're with. There's Claire Denis' Trouble Every Day, but I also just wanted to mention the work of Julia Ducournau, her films Raw and Titane. Definitely also have these female characters that are becoming monstrous in very, very different ways. And I just came across this quote from de Canal where she says, "The idea was to create a new humanity that is strong because it is monstrous and not the other way around. Monstrosity for me is always positive. It's about debunking all the normative ways of society and social life. This was the case with Raw as well. Her monstrosity had her emancipated." So I think, there's something in the water in France, and the women directors are drinking it.
One that did come to mind was John Carpenter's Starman. The story of that is Karen Allen is living alone in her house. She's got a husband who has died, and an alien arrives and is being chased by the authorities and takes on the form of her dead husband, played by Jeff Bridges. And I feel like that's got a really great point of view about American society and it's sort of the American character as they go on a road trip, a forced road trip, I suppose, because they're fleeing the authorities. The government are after him, and so you kind of see. I mean, Karen Allen, I suppose, is also a POV character, but you see the world through the eyes of this alien. So America is recast and re-represented through an alien perspective. And so you get to see, I guess, classic American situations and locations and beautifully shot locations. And it's this really sweet, tender love story about a woman reconnecting, I guess, with the idea of her husband, but also it helps her move on from her grief by being with this guy who looks just like her husband, but he knows nothing about the planet, and she sort of has to guide him through it. And it's just a really beautiful film, and really touching, and really out of the box for John Carpenter. Who usually does these horror films, and very rarely acts in this sort of reflective mode. I think when The Thing came out, it flopped because it went up against E.T. because everyone wanted to see a nice cuddly alien, not a world-destroying, shape-changing pile of goo. So it feels like this is a reaction to that of like, I can make a fun, a warm and fuzzy, cuddly alien movie too, and he just nailed it. And Starman is such a great film. Did Jeff Bridges get nominated? I think he got
possibly
nominated for an Oscar. And it's such a strange, idiosyncratic performance. It's like, imagine being an actor being like, I'm going to be an alien, and just like, how do you even start doing that? I don't know if he had what coaches he had or stuff, but it's such a very strange, very interesting performance by him, and really, really good. And Karen Allen is great as always, lovely. I think, is it Charles Martin Smith is the government agent who's chasing him down, who also kind of grows fond of him too and has an affinity for him. It's just a really, really lovely. And if you're too burned out by telekinetic horror and dark 80s sci-fi action satire, Starman is a great palate cleanser, I think.
Well, it is that whole thing that through the non-human or the alien, it's about defining what the human is, or they become more human than human. Yeah. So think about Blade Runner as well as another film you could put here as well. I also think of like The Day the Earth Stood Still, where you have the alien, it looks like a human, and he's trying to find the good in humanity. The alien comes down, and what's the first thing someone does is they shoot at him. And he has he has a device that would like cure all diseases or something, but it's been destroyed because so I think this whole thing of the counterpoint of the non-human, it's often more human, or can tell us more about what it is to be human. Yeah. All right, my last honourable mention is something that I hope we can talk in much more detail in a future episode. I mentioned the French women directors, so I have to also mention my possibly my favourite film of 2024. This is
where I thought you were going.
Which is The Substance from Coralie Fargeau. I don't know how to say her final name. She's awesome, but I don't know how to pronounce her name properly. And if you think about Carrie, which is all about monstrosity coming with puberty, The Substance is, this whole idea of, I guess, the monstrosity that comes with aging, or the way women, as they get older, are kind of cast as these monstrous hag-like figures that if you're not going to fit into the societal ideals of youth and beauty, then you just become, there's no use for you anymore. This whole thing of going from being objectified to abjectified. And I could go on, and I do hope at some point that we can talk about the substance in much more detail.
It's definitely a point of view movie. It's all from the point of view of the main character. And nothing happens outside their experience. And
her becoming, almost embracing the monstro Elizasu, as we get to see towards the end.
Elizasu.
Yeah. It's such a great movie. All right. I think that's it.
So that's another episode of Sci-Frights, everybody. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook and Letterboxd, and you can email us at scifrightspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody, and join us next time. Bye-bye.